somewhat optimistic going into situations. I generally feel like I've got nothing to lose. And I think maybe that's a bit of a privilege, to be honest. I think mindset privilege is a real thing, just like perspective privilege, something we don't talk about enough. And had I been in an early situation where someone was continually telling me the things that I were doing were wrong or not good enough or whatever, I can quite easily see how I would anticipate that feedback going into anything where feedback was going to be given. And it's actually pretty remarkable. I mean, you know, because those early experiences you would assume would smash someone's like self-esteem pretty severely and make them kind of retreat into safe places. One of the safest places is where we don't get feedback and someone doesn't shout at us, or you know. But this was your first audition, right? Game of Thrones.
Yeah, well, one of I had an audition before that, which I also was very excited about and then didn't get. So that was like my first professional rejection.
But you were still putting yourself out there in situations where you could be rejected.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it was because the only time that I really felt that joy that I saw in other people was when I was like dancing or performing. And there was this feeling that I would get that I was like, this is like, I feel like human, you know? And so I was like, I've just got to do anything I can to like do this forever. And so from a very young age, I was like, I want to go to stage school and I want to, I'm happy to leave everything and go and do that. And so I really, every opportunity was like, I guess that little part that you said, like, I've got nothing to lose. It was like, on the other side of this could be absolutely everything. So I have to do it.
I read this book. I say read. I watched the summary on YouTube. But I'll just say it sounds more impressive. I read this book called The Body Holds the Score. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. And one of the most fascinating things about it is it talks about how acting and moving the body in like yoga have been proven to be the best forms of antidepressant, like without, you know, taking SSRIs or anything. They've been proven to, and I remember thinking acting is a great antidepressant. How is that possible? But what you're saying now rings true. It talks about how it kind of disassociates from identity when we act. And so what you're saying now seems to validate what I read.
I'd love to read that because that's like exactly what I instinctively like discovered. Like it just happened and I thought, like this is what I'm supposed to do.
Have you ever figured out why acting was because I say the word escapism, but why it was so liberating for you? Is it escapism? Is it because it disassociates you from your own identity? Is it because you can create this new?
There's like two parts of it. It was like how I felt like within my body, like everything floated away, and like the way that it felt to move my body or the way that it felt to like contort my voice or like whatever, it just like that feeling when you're like can't stop laughing, it was just like incredible. And then there was the way that it made other people feel. And I guess like with acting, with dancing, it was very much about the way that it felt and not necessarily the way that it looked or like how other people would experience it. But with acting, it's like you get that sort of two-way thing. And I also saw the joy that it would bring other people. And like, I guess like you're like not disappointing. You're like making someone laugh or you're making someone happy or you're like, and that was like, you know, fun and new.
I was going to say Game of Thrones was a smash hit, but it feels like a slight understatement.
I feel like smash hit is, it was huge.
The fame piece. I've had a smidge of fame, like 7 people know who I am, right? And sometimes it can be a little bit difficult. So I can't even, I can't even imagine, especially with the sort of confounding factors of your age, just trying to figure out who you are, becoming famous for being a character on a huge show, being in your sort of adolescent years, all of these things all at the same time. When you look back and, and I remember you saying about how people were like forecasting your downfall because of all those factors.
Yeah. Actually, the strangest thing about it, the hardest thing, I think, was like needing to articulate who I was and what I loved and the things that I didn't like and what I had an opinion on and what, that I remember at the time being like, oh gosh, I really don't know anything about anything. I really need to know these things. I need to, and then years later you go like, oh, well, I said that my favorite film was this, and like that's not true. And it's like you don't need to know any of that stuff. No, like it's all just like a journey, right? It's all like there's never like an end.
What advice would you give that person, 13-year-old Maisie?
To be honest with you, like I wish that I'd have just trolled it all a bit more, and like whatever instead of really digging deep and going, oh, what is the real, just like whatever you feel that day, that's okay. And it can change the next day. Because that is just like life. You don't have to be beholden to anything that you've said or done. You can let it all go and like rip up the rule book. I hated London, moved back to Manchester, went to New York, and then you're like, actually, I'm going to go back to London. Like, this is what I'm going to do now. And it's not going to be like something that you're like, oh, I wish I hadn't done this. Like, you're like, no, this is what I want now. And that's like, that's just sort of the way it is. So I kind of wish that I'd have just like, not just like tortured myself to know like, what is the real answer to these like silly, fun questions. And then been like, oh no, I've like portrayed myself all wrong. This is not who I am. Because it's like water.
Would you change the timing of the events that happened in your life if you could? Like
acting when I was super young. The only thing I really feel like we didn't have a lot growing up, but like I've never.
You grew up in a council house.
Mm-hmm. And like, have always had like a awareness of how hard my mum worked, like raising us, giving us everything that she did, putting food on the table, But like I never. I remember like when I was sort of like 18 and a lot of my friends started going to uni, getting jobs, whatever. I remember like there was I was like I never, even though I know what that struggle was like growing up, like I've never like struggled to get a job or struggled to make rent or anything like that. And I think not that I would change that, of course, like I'm so fortunate, but I guess like I never want to lose sight of like the perspective of like just how fortunate that I've been and like just how tone deaf it is for me to believe that I like would understand what it's like to to struggle to make rent and want to be a creative person and not know whether to get like a sensible job or to like, because I don't know what that struggle is like at all. So yeah, I don't know that like I sometimes worry that I'm like alienated in some ways because it all happened when I was so young, and like literally from the age of 12 I've been like set for life, and that's like very different to how I was like before that age.
Is there a mixture of emotions surrounding that, like being set for life at 12 as you grow up? Now, I've sat here with a couple of guests who come from like a council estate or grew up in very difficult situations, and they often express this kind of, I remember Jackmate doing it, express this kind of almost, guilt's a bit of an interesting word, but like, why did I remember Jack saying to me, I can make thousands and thousands of pounds from just making YouTube videos. And I watched my dad not make the same amount of money in like a year or whatever. And I could just make it from one YouTube video. And he would go back and he'd meet someone. I remember him saying he met someone in a pub that was like a cancer doctor, and he's making more than them, just sat at home. He always expresses this kind of like, I don't know, guilt or injustice. Have you ever felt that?
Definitely. Like, just, yeah, real, like the guilt around like, allowing yourself to have nice things or do nice things because you're like able to. Like I felt like when I was a kid, everything stopped happening and all my problems were going to go away. And then like all my problems didn't go away. And then I was set for life when I was 12 and I thought all my problems are going to go away. And I was like, well, it's not like that unless all of my friends and family are that way too. Because like, how are we all supposed to like be okay if only one person is okay? And, you know, you give people what you can, but you don't see the pain, take the pain away for another person, doesn't take the pain away for yourself. Like, and then you realize that like actually life is something else entirely. And like the biggest problem that a lot of people face is making money and like making enough money to live and like support their family. But being able to do those things isn't in it like the only thing that like makes you happy. Like when you take that problem away, there's sometimes still a very hard discussion that you have to have with yourself where it's like like a fundamental chat where you have to tell yourself that, well, I don't know, there's a lot of things. I don't want to take away from the fact that like having money enables you to like even be able to comprehend or like
another set of problems.
Yeah. Like I know that in itself is like an incredibly privileged position to be in. But like money won't take the pain away. It will take like the stacking bills or, you know, or the fear of like losing a house, you know.
It doesn't undo trauma. You can't buy, you know, trauma away.
Yeah.
Even if you can keep the heat on and the electricity and feed yourself, there's still for many people another level of trauma which money can't seem to solve for directly. The